inside of this sleeper hold.
Vern, there's something on your neck.
Yeah, right. I'm not falling for that one a chance.
No, Vern, there is something on your neck.
It's a leech.
Leeches! Oh, my God! Jesus Christ!
Hello, and thank you for finding your way to the secret society of fly tires. You might have gathered from the intro that the very first episode of this podcast is all about leeches. I'm not sure what I'm doing with my life, but I started a fly tying podcast and put together over 2,000 words about leeches that I'm now going to read into a microphone in my car parked in the garage. I hope you enjoy them and stick around for a chat with one of my personal favorite tyers, Jonathan Farmer from Midnight Sun Custom Flies.
I don't think there's anything that can truly prepare you for sticking your arm into a container full of leeches.
Leeches have a long history of Hollywood stardom. They made their big screen debut in the 1959 sci-fi horror classic Attack of the Giant Leeches, where a backwoods game warden and a local doctor discover that giant leeches are responsible for disappearances and deaths in a local swamp, but the local police don't believe them. I think when I was a kid, I became aware of leeches by watching the movie Stand By Me, with the famous scene where the young actors emerge from the water covered in them after swimming. Will Wheaton narrowly avoided death after a leech tried to bite his dick off. Or it might have been when seeing Steve Martin on SNL playing a medieval doctor trying to treat an ailing Bill Murray with leeches and boar's vomit. I later went on to defeat the Leech Queen from the Resident Evil franchise on PlayStation, and listened to about 1 million punk and metal songs about leeches. We love to compare people of certain professions like politicians, lawyers, paparazzi, agents, and entertainment managers to leeches, all of which may or may not be true.
Ah, the leech. Ah, the leech.
Before I go any further, I'd like to be upfront and say that I am just a humble fly tyer and didn't even attend my senior year of high school, so I dug up what the experts have to say about leeches. Philip Rowley from Flycraft Angling wrote, "Humans have a natural dislike or disdain for creatures making a habit of dining on living hosts. Mosquitoes, black flies, and deer flies are some noted favorites. Leeches also have membership into this infamous club. History portrays leeches as maniacal bloodsuckers with a lousy reputation, tracing their roots back to medieval times where leeches were used for medicinal purposes, a practice that is still in use today. To those who don't fish, the mere mention of leeches brings about involuntary facial contortions, and sometimes surprise at their use as bait or imitation when fishing. From a fly fishing perspective, leech patterns make an ideal searching pattern and are a big fish conqueror. In an article for Hatch magazine, Ben Krasinski wrote, "There is a reason why the woolly bugger is chosen by a vast number of anglers around the world. They work. And they don't just work, they work almost everywhere. Perhaps chief amongst the reasons why woolly buggers are so effective is the leech, which woolly buggers imitate so well. Leeches are found in virtually all manner of fresh water, whether it be a stagnant farm pond, a big windswept lake, a slow-moving creek, or a tumbling freestone stream. Because leeches are commonly found in fresh water, they are avidly eaten by trout and many other fish." Tom Rosenbauer related an anecdote about blue ribbon flies Craig Matthews regarding the importance of leeches in the Orvis Streamside Guide to Trout Foods and Their Imitations. To anyone who doubts the importance of leeches, Matthews has them observe while he throws a leech into the water in front of cruising trout. The fish will always track down and eat the leech, even if it was feeding on mayflies. A. Provoke wrote about the egg-sucking leech for Meat Eater. "My personal favorite gray area in the fly fishing arena is fishing egg patterns for steelhead. As an angler who learned how to fish with a spinning rod and bait box, I never quite understood how fly fishing had its own set of rules. One can imagine my surprise when I finally made the decision to start fly fishing, only to face backlash for fishing an egg-sucking leech. Further adding to my confusion were the anglers who fished egg-sucking leech patterns, yet screamed sacrilege on anglers fishing a simple egg pattern. How did making the fly bigger by attaching a second piece of artificial bait make it any more ethical? Contrary to popular belief, flies with egg heads have been around for close to 200 years. This makes it difficult to validate arguments that we shouldn't fish egg suckers because they're not traditional. I'll cap things off with a famous quote from Emily Autumn in The Asylum of Wayward Victorian Girls. "If leeches ate peaches instead of my blood, then I would be free to drink tea in the mud."
What are leeches anyway? What are leeches anyway?
Facts about leeches. Phylum, Annelida. Order, Hirudinea. There are over 650 species of leeches worldwide. More than 60 species reside in North America. They're cousins to terrestrial earthworms. They inhabit both marine and freshwater environments. Muddy-bottom, nutrient-rich waters can be home to prolific leech populations. They have suckers at either end of their bodies. They're found in all colors, with common colors being olive, black, brown, and gray. Leech colors often depend on water quality, color, and pH levels. Most North American leeches are omnivorous, not bloodsuckers. Common sizes are 3 to 7 centimeters, but when fully extended can reach over 25 centimeters. They change shape when threatened and curl up into a ball. They're hermaphroditic and possess both male and female sexual organs, though they still must mate in pairs, as self-fertilization is not possible yet. Mating leeches can be seen grossly intertwined. They use the stream's current to move and drift from spot to spot. They also swim by elongating and contracting their bodies in a slow, undulating manner, but can move much quicker when in danger. They're grody.
The Cherokees had an ancient myth about Tlanoosie, a gigantic leech the size of a house. It lived in a river in North Carolina. It supposedly crawled into the water, which bubbled and foamed. The water then erupted into a water spout and washed its prey down that was standing on the bank. It ate the ears and nose of its victims. The Burekbaddie is a leech-like creature found in Scotland's Western Isles. The Burekbaddie is described as a gigantic leech with 9 eyes that is dark in color. It is said to be attracted to the smell of horses, and if someone rides a horse across the water where it's hiding, it will wrap itself around the horse and its rider and drag them under the water and devour them, and if food is scarce, the Burekbaddie will eat each other. The January 2020 issue of Scientific Fact magazine confirmed that Scotland's infamous Loch Ness Monster is most likely just a giant leech. As far as tying leech flies goes, it's important to note that they have been documented as being tied as early as the 1740s, with the horse leech fly being featured in Richard Brooks' Art of Angling. A wide range of tying materials can be used, but the most common are marabou feathers, rabbit strips, mohair, seal's fur, squirrel zonkers, mink, sparkle chenilles, saddle hackles, and more. Leeches are a highly useful and sometimes controversial fly that have long been known as a proven producer for anglers of all skill levels. They have uses on all types of water and can be fished using almost any angling discipline, from balanced leeches in still water for spotted bass to swinging for steelhead on coastal rivers. I might dub my guest Jonathan Farmer the king of leeches if that didn't sound so bad. It also couldn't be further from the truth because he isn't a leech at all. He just ties up some of the fishiest leeches out there. He's a supportive, inspiring, generous, good dude. Before I let you listen in on my chat with him, let me tell you a quick story about why I love fishing leeches, and specifically Farmer's graboid leech. My favorite way to fish, and what I end up doing the most, is swinging flies with two-handed rods. That being said, I just love to fish, see new water, and learn new things. My buddy Steve invited me on a trip to fish the famous McLeod River during the October caddis hatch, and also hit the Pitt River in Upper Sac while we were in the area. He wanted me to catch my first fish on a dry fly. I didn't. And try some Euro nymphing with him. He recommended me some gear to grab, sent me some YouTube videos to watch on rigging and casting, etc. And like usual, I felt overly confident and didn't even really cast the new setup I had bought until we arrived at the river. I mean, you don't even actually cast when Euro nymphing, right? Whatever. It was immediately obvious I was in over my head again, and I tried to figure things out as I went. Steve caught about 20 trout to my 1 on the McLeod, and continued to catch fish on the Upper Sac and the Pitt. As amazing as the surroundings were, I was having a brutally frustrating trip. It was the 4th day of a 4-day fish mission, and I had only caught 1 small trout on the first day. We spent our last day on the Pitt River, which they say has very treacherous wading, and I will tell you that what they say is true. I was stumbling around on boulders, narrowly avoiding accidental swims most of the day. I spent way more time hiking around trying to get to a spot I could never find than I did fishing. It was one of those days where my flask was close to empty by lunchtime and I'm smoking like a chimney, sitting on the bank cursing Mother Nature for being so awesome and humbling. Asking her to at least allow me to see a cool bird or an otter or something, anything. Feeling like I was going to be skunked on my last day of fishing, I figured I might as well enjoy casting a little more and threw on a more familiar setup. A single-hand Skagit line with a medium-slow sinking head and a graboid leech. I found the one swingable run in the area and was having a better time again and started to feel a little bit confident. I was perched on an outcropping of weeds littered with crawfish remains from the otter I had politely asked to see earlier, and soon enough a beautiful wild trout hit my leech. It wasn't huge, and it didn't need to be. It's something that seems to happen for me. My general skill level combined with mostly swinging flies and being easily distracted doesn't add up to a lot of fish in my net. But when I really need a fish, Mother Nature shows some pity and gives me one. I'm forever grateful every time and quickly apologize for anything I had said on the bank previously in frustration. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. She knows I was kidding and we both laugh about how I probably should have at least thought about using a crawfish pattern after standing in a pile of them, and how every living thing is connected through consciousness and we're all beings made of light trapped in these human bodies trying to complete some unknown mission in this hologram reality. And anyway, that one fish was enough to fix the whole trip for me, and I've loved the graboid leech ever since. So I set out to talk to the man who created the pattern and learn all about it. Jonathan Farmer is the owner of Midnight Sun Custom Flies based in Anchorage, Alaska. Midnight Sun offers up premium and sometimes proprietary materials at reasonable prices for fly tying nerds like you and I. He's a prolific fly tyer and has created some awesome patterns, such as the Led Zeppelin, the Avenger, the Beast of Burden, and the graboid leech. He also teaches one-on-one fly tying classes online and group classes as well. Chances are, if you haven't searched for them specifically, you've probably stumbled onto one of his tying videos on YouTube. If you're still unfamiliar, let me introduce you to Jonathan Farmer.
All right. Jonathan, thank you for being here and agreeing to let me chat at you for a while. Let's start out with a really simple question. When did you start tying flies?
That's a good question because I'm not exactly sure. I can give a ballpark, but I'm going to say it was roughly 6 years ago.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I haven't been tying my entire life.
You wouldn't have guessed that. You wouldn't have guessed that.
Well, I mean, I've put in, over the course of these 6 or so years, I've put in the amount of time that some people will put in a lifetime.
I hear you.
I started tying, thinking I would save myself money, and started out tying some dries. And then it kind of just became a passion, and, going through some stuff in life, it became a good outlet.
Yeah.
And I would go to work, ski patrol all day. And then I'd come home and immediately start tying dry flies. And I did that for an entire winter. And over the course of that winter, I broke my hand, and then had some other injuries and stuff like that. So I was actually tying with a cast on my right hand for a while, and I was tying like size 12 and 14 caddis.
Just immediate handicap right away.
Yeah. So that was kind of cool, actually. I talked to my surgeon. I didn't have surgery, but I talked to my ortho and I was like, "Can I tie?" And he's like, "Yeah, it'd actually probably be good for you to use those other fingers so you don't, your arm doesn't completely atrophy." So I tied a bunch and just had like little jars full of dry flies. I probably tied 500 caddis over the course of that winter, and then just kind of became a daily thing where I'd sit down and tie, half a dozen dries at least, and yeah, and then just kept going from there. And once I got into streamers, I was really glad that I'd taken that time to learn how to tie on really, on small hooks, especially for Alaska. Size 12 or 14, small for Alaska. And I'm glad that I'd taken that time, because once you get into bigger stuff, proportions just become a little bit easier to figure out.
Yeah, that's about as small as I ever want to go. Like, it's as small as I can deal with.
Yeah, likewise. I'm currently sitting here tying size 12 soft tackles, and 14s are okay, but anything smaller than that is pointless, in my opinion.
It sounds like it kind of worked out in a weird way in your favor, that you had a kind of a handicap, like a reason to be home and doing stuff like that, to like focus and like really get into it. And I was going to ask you why you tie flies, right? Like, and for me, it's not just like a keep my brain busy thing, or, I could zone out at the same time and not really think about much at all when I'm doing it. It's also like a totally immersive, creative thing. But at the same time, you could be following like detailed instruction or having to learn new technique to pull something off. And it's also like meditative too, And everyone struggled during the pandemic, and that's kind of when I really dug in. I battle with my own, anxiety and depression issues, and on top of that, I busted my eardrum at the start of the pandemic and had surgery on that, and had a reason to be home, and had to stay home, for public health orders and stuff like that. And
what month did you puncture your eardrum?
March of 2020. So it's like, I think the whole thing started in February or early March, and end of March.
No swimming for you for that summer, huh?
No, none at all.
The reason why I ask is I've punctured my eardrum.
Oh, you have you? Yeah, so you know how it is, dude.
Yeah, I did it with a Q-tip when I was 13.
Oh man, dude, I got hit with a baseball, so it wasn't it's a lot different.
That sounds a lot better than mine.
Yeah, but it's just like it really helped me get through that kind of stuff. And I spent a lot more time doing it because of that too. And outside of that, obviously the reward of making one that actually works, and maybe you actually catch something on it too, right? But
yes, now I do it because I don't know what else to do.
Did you have like a mentor when you started, or
no? No, I did not. David McPhail, because I've watched a bunch of his YouTube videos, but really, like, kind of joking. Never spoken to the man. No, I watched a few of David McPhail's videos. I've watched some other fly tying videos on YouTube, and other than that, it's been a lot of trial and error. Figuring out what threads to use. And I can actually thank a guy by the name of Caleb Hanna for turning me on to Vivus ADOT. Met him in Forks a few years ago, and was getting these, like, he was sitting, we were in a hotel room next to these two dudes, and we ended up hanging out, and he's sitting there tying an intruder, and he got like this really nice, tiny, neat, tidy little head. And I'm like, how in the world? Because I was tying with like Danville 210 and Uni 140 at the time. And like, how are you getting those tiny, tight little neat heads? And he's like, Beavis ADOT, dude. And I'm like, ADOT? Are you insane? Like, no. When you make a dubbing loop, you double it over. And, you make two loops and it doesn't bust. And that was a game changer for me. But outside of that, a lot of trial and error, because I know some guys that tie themselves, but don't don't really do any design or they just kind of follow other people's stuff, and everybody kind of on their own comes up with something. But I, spend a lot of time tying by myself, and for a few years I tied with a buddy of mine a lot, but he's tied the same fly over and over and over and over and over and over and over again for years. And I just can't. I can't do that. For a long time, I wouldn't tie the same fly twice. I was just doing I was just tying a bunch of weird stuff, and my desk was just horribly unorganized. I was tying on my kitchen table. It was a massive, kitchen table, and there were feathers piled like 4 to 6 inches high across the entire table, and I could never find anything. That's when I kind of got into the like swing flies and streamers and stuff, and I could never find anything. It was really frustrating, and I just had stuff everywhere. That was a delight. But anyway,
yeah, it sounds really similar to me. I mean, I kind of just dove in and tried to teach myself. And the first class I took was yours. I mean, it sounds like you didn't do any sort of classes or anything like that ever. Just kind of figured it out. And,
yeah, I'm just full on. Just self-taught.
It's fun. It's fun that way, and you learn from failure. You don't forget those ones, right? And so we had the conversation about Vivus 8 on our class the other day, in basically the same way. I was using the same big thread and having the same question. So
it can be really frustrating, especially when you get to the head of a fly.
So how did Midnight Sun custom flies start then? Like, how did that all come about?
I'd spent a stupid amount of money on feathers, and just kind of like, I don't know, just to kind of like really help pay for some of that and provide some extra income, because ski patrollers don't make a decent living, at least here in Alaska. I know other parts of the lower 48 actually get paid a fairly living wage, but being an adult getting paid $12.50 an hour with an EMT2 and Avalanche 2 certification and all of the other things that and did avalanche mitigation and all sorts of other stuff, and getting paid $12.50 an hour for all of that just wasn't cutting it. So I was like, I'm going to start trying to make a little bit extra income, and just had this desire to become a fly tyer in the industry, and didn't really know anybody that was, I didn't know people tied custom flies. I just was like, well, I'm gonna do this because I'm not happy with the stuff that I get in the shop, and if I'm not happy with it, then there's got to be somebody else that's not happy with the stuff that they're buying in local fly shops that's tied overseas, and it was all just overdressed and inconsistent. And so I harassed my local shop owner. His name's Mike Brown. He owns Mossy's Fly Shop here in Anchorage, and I harassed him to let me put my flies in his shop on consignment. And he finally said, yes, okay. And the next thing you know, I was tying commercially. Everything else kind of fell into place pretty quickly. But yeah, and people often ask me like, well, how'd you get Midnight Sun? Well, I live in the land of the Midnight Sun. Being in Alaska, like all you have to do is come up here in the summer, like one time, and you're like, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah. I thought it was pretty clear. I used to think about it for a second.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of folks that don't seem to get it.
Well, so what are the best and worst parts of being a pro tyer? Like what, like tying commercially? I've always been curious, like what that. I mean, is it tying 8 hours a day? Like what are the worst and best of it?
Oh, I don't tie 8 hours a day anymore.
There was a time though where that was a reality.
there was a time when 70 hours a week was a reality.
Wow.
I've tied 40, it was like 40 or 42 composite loop intruders in one day.
Jeez.
I cried. It's fine. No, but for real, like at the end of that day, my eyes hurt so bad and I was so exhausted. I think I tied for like 12 or 14 hours that day. My body hurt, my eyes hurt, my brain hurt, everything just, when you get to that point in time where, that's a stupid amount of tying. And I tied like 250 intruders in, I don't know, it was like a week.
It didn't make you hate it though. You're still doing it.
No, I just stopped, I never did that again. I never sat down and was like, I'm going to tie 40 intruders today. Like 20 to 24 was kind of my, for that style of fly. When I say that style, I don't mean intruder style because the intruder is a specific platform. I mean like, that kind of, time consuming big steel head, like the Zepron, right? Like the Zepron's got like 17 materials or something like that. And it's silly. And it takes a while to tie. Before you ever tie in your first material, you've got to tie in dumbbell eyes and wire and, all this other stuff. And so it takes some time.
Yeah. I haven't tried that one yet.
For those proportions are key with that fly. I've seen a lot of them tied, and proportions are absolutely key. But with everything, that's kind of the case. You can hide a lot with others, but just tying 70 hours a week for several years was really a lot, and I did that every day. I didn't take many days off. I was very grateful to have the work, but at the same time, I was on the fast track to being burned out. And so, like anything, if you work that much doing one thing, it's gonna drive you mad.
Yeah, for sure. Like with your original patterns, like how do they come about? You're talking about the Zepron. Like, is it like writing a song? Like, I mean, is it kind of like how does the creative spark start with something like that?
Oh no, I've never written a song, but I can imagine. I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, it like with the Zepron. So it really started with the what I would just call the OG prawn. It was the first prawn pattern that I ever did. I sat down one night, I'm like, I'm gonna design a prawn, and I still have the original 3. And by the 4th one, I had that prawn like dialed. The first 2 were garbage. They belong in the garbage, but I keep them. I keep them at a friend of mine's house that I used to tie out a bunch, just for sentimental purposes. I know exactly where they are. They sit down there in this plastic bin. They look awful. But so like that fly that was the course of a few hours. And I tied the first one and I dropped it in the swim tank. And I'm like, no, that looks awful. And so we changed a couple of things and then it ended up getting bigger. And by the 4th one, I'm like, what do you think about this? He was like, yeah. And, so like some flies come out, in a day or an evening. I've had patterns where the second one was the one.
Yeah. Are those the best ones? I mean, like that's how, I'm a musician myself, and that's like how the good songs come out. Like when they come out quick, it's always kind of like natural or whatever,
Yeah. Well, honestly, the Graboid took me a year. And that is by far the pattern that people associate my name with.
Yeah, is that your favorite pattern that you've created?
My least favorite to tie, my favorite to to fish. I fished the mini me, the pine squirrel version. Just I don't know. For me, rabbit. I don't know. I've got this thing with rabbit. I don't particularly. It's not my favorite. But you can't beat the colors that it comes in, though. I'm very, 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 very particular with rabbit. If it's not the right density, if the hide is too stiff or too soft or too thin or too thick, I'm really, really particular about the rabbit that I'll use. But the mini me is a pine squirrel version of that fly, without a doubt. Probably my favorite, like, trout swing streamer fly, leech pattern anyway.
Well, I'd have to agree with you, and that's kind of what this whole episode is about, is leeches, right? And so, like, I want to dig into the graboid a little bit. I mean, could you tell me, like, a little bit more about the creation, the history of that one? I think you said one of the originals is at the bottom of the skeena.
Yeah. I gave the owner of my local fly shop, Mossy's, one, and I gave him a few actually. And he was on his way to go to the Kenai. I said, I want you to fish this for me. I fished it on my, on the Kenai and caught fish, but I want you to take this and fish it on the Kenai and get back to me and let me know, how you did. And he goes, okay. And those guys didn't really particularly care for the name. And
fly names are a whole nother can of worms, dude. We could probably talk about that for an hour.
Yeah, this one is actually part. The name of this fly is part of its inception. So as this fly was being developed, my good friend that I fish with, not exclusively but almost, has this affinity for really bad, like, B movies and even worse, like movies that you'd swear were filmed in people's backyards. Anyway, he was going through this trimmers phase, and he would just yell out, "You'll be sorry you don't give it a name. Graboid, that's what I like." And Mr. Kim in the beginning of the first Trimmers,
Trimmers,
yeah. And so once that fly kind of did take shape, that's what it got named.
It's funny
because he's been a huge help to me throughout my career and just kind of the reason why I was able to get this started in the first place. So that fly went from something that it doesn't look like at all now. The only commonality was that it had a rabbit strip and it had a guinea collar when it started out.
Yeah. How did it evolve really? Like, what were the main differences as it got to where it is now?
Oh man, it didn't have like a belly. It was just like a rabbit strip and some ostrich and guinea, and trying to even think.
You're talking about that belly that's like with the Kraken dub now, like the latest version. Yeah. You think that's what makes it stand out? Like from other leeches, or?
Yeah, probably. Well, so I mean, really, the idea was, so I hate the Dalai Lama. I don't hate it, but I do not care for it. I will not.
We could keep that soundbite and use it out of context. It'd be great.
You can use it however you care. I'll go on record and say I do not like the Dalai Lama, and I will not fish one. I mean, every fish in Alaska has seen one at least once every day of the summer. My local shop, I think, sells like 4,000 roughly Alaska fly fishing goods. Has like 4 pages of them on their website. They probably go through 10,000 of those a year. The shop up in the valley, Three Rivers, probably goes through another 5,000 or 6,000. I mean, they work, but they cast anyway. My idea, and I've talked about this in a couple of articles I've written. It's just like I wanted to make a fly that you could cast on a 2-handed rod, whether it be a 4-weight or an 8-weight, that fished as well as a Dalai Lama. And I was told several times, there's no way you're going to be able to do that.
That's all you needed. This is the doubt. You needed the doubt.
Yeah, just like when someone told me I couldn't tie an intruder, like a composite loop intruder in hand. 30 minutes later, I sent them a photo. Yeah, so I don't know. It just kind of fueled that fire a little bit, and really pushed me to create this fly. And I was sitting in my house in Girdwood when I lived there at the time, and I was tying. It was the middle of a day, and a good friend of mine who grew up here in Alaska, who now lives in Washington, came over, and this guy's fished all over Southeast Alaska and all over Western Alaska and just all over the place. And I had the mini-me in the tank, and it's swimming, and it was the original like colors, the natural pine squirrel with golden demon belly with the red throat and olive silly legs. And he walks up and he goes, "What is that?" And I said, "I don't know. It's just something I kind of came up with." And he like grabbed the line and he gave it a twitching, pulsing motion. And he goes, "I want a dozen of them." I said, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah, yeah, I need those." I was like, "All right." And then that's kind of how that was born. And I was really pushed to like do a composite loop leech when I was with OPST. And I didn't really, I don't know, tying composite loop flies are really a pain, and tying them commercially is kind of a nightmare, and finding like real consistency. But so that's kind of how the Graboid was the big steelhead version was born.
Cool.
And
I'm gonna make sure to link to the videos that you've had. I think there's 2 or 3 on that one fly that you've tied on the Graboid.
There's the original Burekbaddie video, which has like a 7:30 seconds tungsten beadhead. So if you need to get a fly down like the day before yesterday, good way to do it.
Yeah.
And then there's the Gen 2, and then the Mini-Me. They're essentially the same fly. The Mini-Me's just the pine squirrel version.
Yeah, I'm going to link to all 3 of those in the show notes, and I'll link to the materials, for their basic recipe too, in there too. Is there a material you think that's like crucial that can't be subbed out? You think pine squirrel would be the one? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't. You could make another dubbing, work. You could use, a couple of people that use Angora or whatever for the belly of this fly, but the way that Kraken swims, it's just got these micro silly legs in it. And I have it made in some custom colors that I have on my website that I've written recipes for, and it's nothing, like super, no dubbing recipe is just mind blowing. Like, wow, how'd you come up with that? You know what I mean? But like, but particular colors of flash or particular like colors of silly legs or whatever it is. And I have them custom dyed. But that material and, pine squirrel is just something that I think would be nearly impossible to sub unless you could find some. I think I've seen a synthetic version of pine squirrel. I don't know. That would be interesting to look into, though.
It's funny hearing you talk about saying you kind of hate tying it. You love the fly. It's like a band like it's like Metallica and Enter Sandman or something like that. It's like AC/DC and Highway to Hell. Like they don't want to play it every night, but you got to do it. Kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's a great fly, and I'm still learning to tie it myself. Getting better at it. But the videos that I will link to in the show notes should help everybody that hears this, and link it to the materials too.
I mean, I want to say it's a simple pattern. It's
You know
just
what
getting, like, the belly length right.
I get hung up on that, and I get hung up on rigging the Power Pro to the hook at the back. At the back of the strip.
Right, and I see people be lazy about that and just let it dangle with Power Pro. I'm like, what you don't realize is in the current, that hook is going to dangle an inch below your fly.
I don't think I would do it that way. No way.
Yeah, you just tie it straight onto the Power Pro like you would a llama or anything. Any classic trailer hook streamer.
So what patterns do you like tying right now? I see a lot of the kind of more classic stuff on your Instagram, these days.
Yeah, I've actually really, really, really enjoyed diving down the kind of the classic route and then taking my own little spin down that road, but you still kind of follow, platforms, like an Acroyd isn't an Acroyd unless it's, this specific thing or, but you can follow that platform of like a D-fly or some Pacific Northwest kind of classic married wing stuff, like from Deck and Marty's book. And I've just kind of slowly been chipping away at everything in that book. I probably won't mess with the bombers, and I probably will at some point. Who am I kidding?
Just to do them. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Just to say, the one thing that I thought I never could actually tie well would be a bomber or a muddler. I did it and I learned how to do it.
That's cool.
But I don't have the luxury of skating flies here because our fish don't respond. Our steelhead do not seem to respond to skated flies at all. Although I should probably try and fish a muddler subsurface. But the classic kind of stuff has been fun. And then what I didn't realize when I started down this road is that, scaling things down for me is really, really hard. So going from like a 3/0 AJ even to a 1.5 is incredibly difficult for me. But last night I'm sitting on my couch and I was completely exhausted and I could have gone to bed at like 8:00 at night. And it's like 10:30. And I'm sitting there and I just kind of like start thinking to myself, I'm like, a micro trout D-fly. And then I thought, I've got some Firehole 718 size 8s. And I come into my office and I sit down and I throw a hook in the vise and I'm looking at it. And it's kind of got like an AJ-ish shape, I guess. And I really like tying on the AJs and just, they're still available and whatever. But I start looking at it and I'm like, I bet I can tie a micro D-fly on that. And I start thinking about what could I use for, wing material as a substitute to turkey, because turkey is going to be too large of a fiber. Then I pull out a Hungarian partridge skin and I start looking at the wing quills on that and like, just barely too short. And then I look at the tail. Yeah. And so I pluck one of the secondary tail feathers off. They're only like 4 inches long and you only get about, 1.5 inches, 2 inches worth of usable material, but it's got some nice length on the fibers. And so I tie in a wing, like a D-style wing, and it's just awesome. And then I start looking at that tail a little bit more, and I see this dark cinnamon colored tail feather. Like, I could do an Acroyd. So I do a micro-sized Acroyd, and then I'm, as I'm going through it, I'm like, I wonder if I could do one of Marty's October Brights in like a micro trout size. And I look at some peacock quill that I have, and I know it's too short for a bunch of the 3/0 that I have. And I start looking down toward the bottom of that feather, and I'm like, yeah, let's send it. So I tied a Marty Howard's October Bright on that size 8. And now I think I'm going to kind of go down the road of like really pushing some trout spay flies because the industry seems to have it's a niche market, but it's one that is underserved. And there's a ton of soft tackles out there. There's a bunch of soft tackles out there, but I haven't seen anybody do a micro-sized D fly or a micro-sized, like, kind of modern steelheady, but still trout spay fly. So
those ones you posted today were super cool. And there's something about those like really beautiful classic steelhead flies that like you almost don't want to fish them, and like whatever voodoo that come out of your hands to make these flies or your style, like you want to fish them too. It's like you got to fish them. Like they look so good.
Yeah.
Those are super cool, dude.
They're hard to scale.
Yeah, I bet.
I'm sitting there, tying, and I'm kind of thinking to myself about like, what it's like building a model airplane, and how small that is in regard to the original.
Yeah. I see on your Instagram, you're posting those pretty often, and you're like, you're digging in, drinking coffee, listening to music, and like having a good time, being creative. It's inspiring. Do you listen to music or anything when you're tying? Is there something that
I actually, since I work from home and I work by myself, I spend a lot of time by myself. I will listen to some music occasionally. I listen to music at the gym. I get really bored with music for me anyway. And I go in spurts, but I just like, Hulu. Yeah, just reliable, easy, not hard to follow stuff. Bob's Burgers. There's a show called Forged in Fire that's pretty cool. Stuff like that I don't really have to follow or pay attention to.
Yeah.
Just kind of background noise. That's just kind of like, what goes on here while I'm working. I don't get a ton of creative time. So when I do, like, I've been doing like a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, coffee and fly tying thing.
That's cool.
Part of it's to try and help a coffee company that I found, because we've got to support other, small businesses. As a small business owner, I should help support other small businesses, if I want that in return from other people. And also at the same time, so we don't create a whole bunch of, Jeff Bezoses of the world. And we still have small business owners and artists that are able to function in society, and make a living. So I found this coffee company. It's called All Waters Coffee. And they give back 3% of their profit to Wild Steelhead United.
Awesome.
So that's kind of the coffee and fly tying thing that I've been doing on Saturday or Sunday mornings. Just trying to, so many people drink coffee, but Starbucks doesn't give anything back to anybody as far as I know. They certainly don't do anything for the fishing community. So if I can help, in any way, shape, or form, just by buying something that I'm already going to buy anyway, I'm going to do that. So that's kind of why I've been doing that. But
it's cool.
Yeah.
So you said you told me you were born in Texas, right?
I was born in Douglas Well, Lithia Springs, Georgia.
Okay. And you grew up in Texas?
Yeah, mainly. Grew up in Texas for the most part. Grew up bass fishing. And yeah, in the stupid heat that Texas is.
How did you end up in Alaska then?
Fate. No, really, honestly, I just had this, I've been a skier since I was, 15. And I've been breaking bones skiing since I was 15. But, but I always had this picture of skiing skiing mountains that ended in the ocean, and I couldn't place it, and I didn't really know what that was all about. And I'd been offered a job in Alaska, but it just wasn't the right time. Offered a job in Alaska, didn't take it. I was offered a job to like work for a rafting company, and it just wasn't right. And so a few years later, I kind of like left the sport fishing yacht world that I was in, and I was working in South Florida in Fort Lauderdale on a fleet of sport fishing yachts, and doing multi-day trips to the Bahamas and stuff like that, and catching really big, rad ocean fish.
Crazy,
yeah, blue water fishing, and I was hanging out in Texas, and a dear friend of mine was like, "Dude, you should come up to Alaska with me for the summer." I mean, I guess so. I don't really have anything better to do, and so I got a job in Alaska for the summer, working in Denali National Park, and ended up going to Crested Butte, Colorado, for the winter, and then back to Alaska, and then back to Crested Butte, and then back to Alaska, and I stayed.
How old were you? How old were you at that point?
Oh goodness, I was late 20s ish. Yeah, I was in my late 20s because I've been up here for 12 years straight. I moved here in 2010 as a resident. I was like 27, 28 years old when I moved here for the first time. Yeah.
Too cool, man. I mean, Alaska, I want to go real bad. There's so many weird Alaska stories. I mean, like anybody that I know that's been there and comes back, tell me they talked to somebody that told them something super crazy, whether it's like Yeti, Bigfoot stuff, UFOs,
really
HARP project, which is like,
oh yeah, that situation's weird.
Yeah, or underground pyramids. There's all kinds of crazy stuff. You have any weird Alaska stories?
Really? Man,
yeah,
I need to talk to some of the people that you talk to.
Well, 12 years up there and you don't have any?
No. And like I've heard of giants in South, like red-headed giants in Southeast Alaska, and some weird stuff that's happened in Nome, but there was a movie about that. I don't remember what the movie was called. I'm trying to think of some weird stuff that's happened to me here. I mean, I've certainly had some really weird experiences in one particular house, like really kind of scary.
Yeah, in Alaska up there?
Haunting type stuff, yeah. And this is a house that's down in Moose Pass. It's in the middle of nowhere. Not the middle of nowhere, but I mean, you're like 60 miles from the nearest hospital. Kind of like still on the road system, but there isn't a grocery store, a real grocery store within like 50 miles.
Yeah, it's far enough out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But other than that, earthquakes, underground.
You just had one, didn't you?
Yeah. I was sitting on my couch and it felt like the building got hit with a dump truck and it was over. It's just one big like rattle and that was it. Those don't really bother me at all. It's the ones that last like a minute and a half that are like a 7.1 that start to get kind of.
Yeah, for sure. I grew up doing the earthquake drills, going to school in Southern California. That's what we had those all the time. Yeah, the underground pyramid I mentioned. I read a lot about UFOs and stuff like that. There's been recent talk from I think Tom DeLonge talked about a underground black pyramid somewhere near Nome, actually, in Mount McKinley. But yeah, Google that one later and have fun going down that rabbit hole.
I will.
if you feel like it.
Denali, there's an underground pyramid somewhere around Denali.
Apparently, that's what a few people claim. I've heard Tom DeLonge talk about it. want to say Linda Moulton Howe talked about it. Yeah. I mean,
well, I guess I know what I'm doing tonight.
right. Good luck.
Yeah. I mean, I lived in Denali National Park for 3 years. Yeah, that's where I first started. I worked in Denali National Park when it was still called Mount McKinley. And it's since been officially changed to the native Athabascan word Denali. But many still refer, especially in our age group, would still call it, Mount McKinley, because our entire life, that's what it's been called. But yeah, I had no idea. I know there's some really cool stuff in that park as far as fossils and really just crazy topography and, really neat stuff like that. But I had no idea.
Yeah, you don't want to tell me your ghost story?
It's actually happened. Like, I lived in this house for an entire winter, and I would question it if I was the only person that it had ever happened to.
Oh wow, there's other people have had the same experience.
Yeah, very similar ones. Yeah. And one like almost identical. I just got goosebumps. Like,
no shit.
Yeah, it's really unnerving. But like, I would be downstairs. It was a 2-story with a loft. A lot of places here have lofts. A lot of small cabins anyway. And this, you would just hear like pacing upstairs while you're downstairs by yourself. And just, it felt like somebody was standing over you all the time, following you through the house. And it sounds crazy. And if I was, my buddy's wife will not stay in that house by herself, will not do it, refuses to do it. Another good friend of mine was staying down there, and at like 2:15 in the morning, heard a knock on the guest bedroom door, and opened the door, and there was no one there. Everybody in the house was asleep. An hour later, knock on the door, and then the doorknob start rattling. I've had some weird stuff happen in that house. It was crazy.
Yeah, that sixth sense, like intuition thing is a funny feeling, right? And you kind of, I don't know how you can't not trust it, right? Like there's something there that we haven't really like learned how to utilize, or maybe some people have. Maybe people are really psychic or something, and can utilize that. But I feel like there's something there, like you're talking about people that, feel something and they won't stay in that house or whatever. Like
I left that house at like midnight one night.
Yeah,
and drove like 50 miles.
Yeah,
no kidding. To a friend of mine's house in Girdwood. Yeah, just I don't know. Alaska's kind of got like a really weird history.
That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of weird Alaska stuff.
There's a lot of weird history up here, and some not super good stuff. The Russians would come over here and do some really gnarly bad things, and there's just a lot of weird history here. And then we have all the fun stuff like active volcanoes right across the Cook Inlet from Anchorage. And we've got earthquakes, and we've got landslides and massive avalanches and terrible weather and hurricane force winds.
You guys get, isn't it called the Midnight Sun baseball game too? They play up there annually, where they have a game at midnight. Is it in Anchorage? Yeah.
I think it's up in Fairbanks.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Like Barry Bonds and Martin McGuire, I know, played in that. There's a lot of famous baseball players that have come up here and done that whole thing. But they were like in the minor league kind of situations when they did that.
Yeah.
I think it's on a lot of anglers' list of things to do.
Yeah, it should
just
be.
Because, I mean, yeah, I would agree. I would say that I'm very fortunate, especially, in learning how to swing flies and things like that. My home water, we have an estimated like 8,000 rainbow trout per river mile in the summer. And in the fall, sockeye are done spawning. and the trout aren't focused solely on, salmon eggs, they'll start eating swung flies. And in the summertime, I swing soft tackles and come up with a few weird, fun little soft tackles. But one I call the flashbang and some stuff like that. But in fall time, you may not catch a ton of fish, but the fish that you are going to catch are going to be very, very quality.
Radical.
Yeah.
And Jonathan, thank you so much, dude. I mean, you're one of my favorite tires out there right now. I appreciate you letting me.
Thanks. I hope it stays that way.
This is beautiful country, but very isolated. I had great difficulty finding you, but I'm glad I did. You see, we have had to close down one of Mexico's biggest oil fields. Several workers have been killed. We have now determined that the men were killed by certain large underground animals. Graboids.
I told you that's what they named him.
A huge thank you to Jonathan Farmer for such a great chat. He's a great teacher and an inspiring tire. Grab some flies, materials, or sign up for a class with Jonathan at midnightsuncustomflies.com. And thank you for listening. I hope you continue to listen and get motivated to make some cool art on a hook to throw in the water. I hope you get lucky and a fish is around that's hungry enough to want to taste it. Check the show notes for relevant links and go to secretsocietyofFlyTires.com for everything about the show. As I sign off today, I'll leave you with some information on organizations that I feel are playing crucial roles in things I care about. Cast Hope is a nonprofit organization positively impacting kids and their mentors in California and Western Nevada through free fly fishing and outdoor experiences. Through their program, clients build mentoring relationships, fly fishing skills, outdoor knowledge, sustainable practices, and personal values. Cast Hope's gift of the outdoors empowers each mentoring pair to grow closer as they participate in healthy hobbies together. Check them out at casthope.org and whichever social network you like to use. Wild Steelheaders United was established to educate and mobilize the numerous wild steelhead advocates. It's a place where anglers can become more informed about wild steelhead biology and ecology, keep abreast of policy issues, and learn about Trout Unlimited's conservation work. As demonstrated by history, it is certainly possible to rally conservation-minded steelhead anglers to weigh in on a specific management decision that threatens to eliminate something they value. But there is no precedent for advancing a proactive, sustainable policy agenda at scale through purely volunteer efforts. Chances of conservation success are greatest if we have the backing of as many individuals as possible across all the Pacific states. This is why Wild Steelheaders United is critical. Visit wildsteelheaders.org for more info.
This episode of the Secret Society of Fly Tires is brought to you by our good friends at Anchor Fish and Chips in Roseville, California. A great restaurant that the entire family will love. You can even bring in your freshly caught bounty and they'll fry it up for you right then and there. And here's a hint, if you ask for the Captain Special, they'll fry you up a big ol' honkin' fish with the guts still in it. Don't get rid of the guts. Them's the tastiest part. Visit Anchor Fish and Chips today for a meal you will never forget. Please note that this is not a real advertisement, and the company, brand, entity, or product mentioned in the preceding ad in no way endorses, agrees with, or knows about this podcast.